Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot.
And today I'm delighted to be joined by Greg Johnsen. He is the CEO of Lifelink. Greg, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Good to be here.
So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, how you arrived at this role, just to get a little bit of context about the organization and how you've arrived here.
My background is technology and specifically building companies, technology companies in Silicon Valley. I'm a product marketing, product management, sales and marketing executive. The last company I founded was a supply chain orchestration platform in the cloud that was focused on life sciences with one of the big verticals. So pharmaceutical companies were our customers. One of the things I've really observed over my career is just the power of these inflection points when you hit a big inflection point in technology. So, for example, cloud was a major inflection point, and getting what are called multi-tenant platforms that can support a large-scale rollout across many companies for the same piece of software was a big inflection point. And I co-founded a company and built a company around that called GT Nexus in my last venture. And what really excited me about Lifelink and getting this company off the ground is another big inflection point, which is the power of automated conversations. And in healthcare, as you know, Nick, it's so much of what we're trying to solve in healthcare is the consumer relationship, the patient relationship, and patient engagement specifically. How to keep patients engaged in healthcare protocol, whether it's getting ready for visits or surgery or handling and helping patients through a visit and after a visit. One of the things that's really exciting to me about conversational technology is it's supernatural. It is the original.
When you say that, you don't mean ghost, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is the original interface. It is the thing. We've spent a lot of time building apps and portals and digital tools to reach out to consumers, to engage them. But if you look at what these systems, how they're not faring very well. I mean, apps tend to be hard to download. They're harder than people think. There are 300,000 digital apps out there today, and it's crowded. But if you think about if one of the things we're trying to pull off is to make the engagement very low friction and to make it very engaging, it has to be simple, and it has to be personalized, and it has to be smart. And this is the power of conversational technology and what's emerging. So that's what got me excited about getting into this combination of great breakthrough technology in an industry that's in desperate need of it, which is healthcare, and making conversation scale when you've got this limited resource of people to do the job.
So we get a little bit of a sense of Lifelink. Tell us what that company is and what they do in this space.
So Lifelink is a technology platform and a solution provider of conversational systems. So we build patient engagement solutions that have that conversational. When I say conversational, I mean message based. Almost, it's like texting. So there's no heavy app, there's no heavy portal, but we build full stack, end-to-end heavy systems that have a very simple interface on the front end. And so they're designed to be integrated to back-end health system. So, and then we point that technology at high-value areas where health systems and pharmaceutical companies have been very challenged in reaching patients, engaging them, and keeping them engaged. So, for example, there are dozens of these areas just in getting patients ready for a visit. So we build solutions, for example, that help patients schedule a visit and get ready for a visit. Or we help patients through informed consent, and we help patients after visits respond to surveys and do patient-reported outcome initiatives. So we're a builder of these conversational systems. And you can think of Lifelink as both a platform that allows us to build these solutions quickly, but also a portfolio company that has a dozen or so of these full stack solutions that target before, during, and after healthcare visit engagement.
So as I think about conversation, I mean, one of the fundamentals of speech and, long been in this space is that it is the absolutely lowest common denominator of interaction. We all remember stories, and for me, conversational interactions are part of those stories, the exchange, as you describe it, that engagement. And you mentioned something that sort of reminds me of this, the data point that when people look at emails, I think it's somewhere of the order of, less than 5% get responses. But we respond to text messages almost instantly and with a very high percentage rate. So it sounds like you're taking that concept and putting that into essentially technology that we can engage with in the healthcare space. Is that a fair sort of assessment?
Yep, absolutely. The open rate on text messages is 97% or better, much, much higher than email. And 80% of people use text messaging as a way to communicate on a regular basis. It's people spend more time on their mobile phones texting or text messaging in apps than they spend in social networks. So it is the place to meet a consumer if you can figure it out. So if you can take that modality, which is simple, it's a conversation. I say, you say, and build workflow around it. So it's guided.
Right.
It can be super, super powerful. And then when you make it automated, when you automate that, so it doesn't require a human on the other side to connect or talk to, because you could staff up, you could use that great modality to hire a call center filled with people who are texting consumers. The real breakthrough is swapping out that human with a synthetic software agent. That's chatbot, chat plus robot, chatbot.
Right.
And that's what makes the whole thing scale. So you get 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 scale. Now, somebody's going to say, well, yeah, but isn't connecting with a human the gold standard? Isn't it always better at the end of the day for a consumer or patient to actually reach a human and talk to them? And I would say one of the sort of incremental sort of discoveries over time is just how much of the human interaction actually is better suited for a bot than a human. So
yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. In fact, people are quite often more honest with chatbots and technology than they are with their own physician. We know this, repeatedly. I have to ask, are you going to beat the Turing test?
Well, I'm not sure the Turing test is always, it's not, in many cases, to be honest with you, it's not the right test. These digital assistants in this, the big opportunity is not to fake it. It's not to become a human. It's to become a very good digital assistant and to offload huge parts of the cognitive stack that humans are, quite frankly, not good at. And humans don't really care to talk to humans about. The last time you did intake with somebody, even if it was just calling a customer service center about a broken refrigerator, the intake part of that is no fun. It's not fun to do with a human. It's not. But for a bot, it's actually way more efficient, and the net promoter score, customer satisfaction scores of consumers when they talk to a bot are much higher with many of those tasks. So that's not about passing the Turing test. That's not about like, oh, I thought it was a human. It's not that. It's about other tests, which is net promoter score, efficiency, trust, reliability, expediency, right? And all those things can be engineered and done very, very well with a synthetic wired in conversational assistant.
So, this is really hard to do. What is it? How is it that you've gone about this process to create something that really does engage? Because it's just that there are so many diverse potential pathways. It's not like you can program a pure algorithm that understands it. What's going on behind the scenes?
Right. There, in the world of conversational technology, you can think of sort of two dimensions. One dimension is what you probably know of, and people always talk about, which is the ability of a conversational assistant to understand, interpret, and understand what you're saying and respond in a smart way. So there's a whole lot of technology natural language processing, machine learning, AI technology, much of it being commoditized now because it's big, heavy technology that you can just use, right? And the other side of the spectrum is what I would call programmatic guided workflow, or you could call it almost robotic process automation, the ability to take somebody through a path. And we work both ends of the spectrum at Lifelink. There are moments in a conversation where you have to open up the aperture and allow free text to come in, where you want to understand what somebody is trying to say. So you have to have the libraries and the capabilities to understand intents and the entities being described. Somebody who wants to request an appointment or who wants to, submit an adverse event report. These are things that the technology has to understand and respond to. But the truth is, a lot of that technology is still very hard to pull off. And if you've ever played with a bot, you probably have seen it's not hard to get even the best bots, what we call into the ditch. You'll ask a bot, a grocery bot, what's the price of milk? And they'll say, I don't know. I don't understand the question. And that part of the experience can be very frustrating. So one of the things you have to pull off in these conversational flows is the judicious use of technology in some areas that's not quite ready for prime time, but in other areas is very ready for prime time. So you'll see a lot of Lifelink flows that we orchestrate and use technology and AI to surface designed pathways to the user so they can very quickly click and get to a pathway and move through a protocol without having to sort of play the guesswork game of trying to get the bot to understand what you're saying. So
right.
That's the real technology innovation here is stitching all those pieces together. And finally, at the bottom of it, since it is a protocol, since it is about getting somebody to do something, it's driven from data. It's driven from a system that already knows something about you as a patient. We know some of your demographic information. We know some of your clinical information. And we know that you're trying to get through a visit right now. And we know what it's for. So we can use a lot of that information to be smart about the kind of conversation and the kind of the set of pathways that we're presenting to you, as opposed to having you tell us. Because when you tell us, we have to figure it out. And there's technology to help us do it. But, so much of healthcare is about us guiding a patient through a flow. And the real magic is absorbing all the underlying information, generating the pathways, and then guiding patients through the pathways with smart, seamless, frictionless choices.
So for those of you just joining, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and today I'm talking to Greg Johnsen. He's the CEO of Lifelink. We were just talking about chatbots and their stickiness through that sort of engagement process. And what it sounded like to me is that one of the key elements to this is sort of loading up these chatbots with the same thing that our brains have when we talk to somebody, which is context. Mm-hmm. I get visual context when I speak to somebody from their, face. And I'm not saying you're necessarily doing that, but it's all the other data. So I know you're a male and, your age and, so I apply all of that in terms, and it sounds like there's a big part of that. Is that some of the sort of insights and secret sauce that's going on?
Absolutely. And that context comes from a variety of places, right, Nick? It's context about the specific protocol, right? The pathway, the clinical pathway that we're taking a patient down, but it's also context that comes from the data we know about you, as you say, your age, your gender, but it could also be the context of the conversation itself, what we're learning in the conversation. So if a patient, I'll give you a very simple example. We learn a lot in a conversation based on how long it takes a consumer to click through a set of steps. It says something about comprehension. It may say something about health literacy, right? And if somebody comes back to a question 2 times or 3 times, that says something. If 70% of the people in a cohort are clicking on the same 4 or 5 questions out of 700 questions, that says something. So you learn a lot about context, even in a single conversation. So if you've got a system that's pulling demographic detail and clinical detail out of an EMR, for example, and a lab test result out of an imaging system, and also pulling data from the conversation itself and knows something about the protocol, you can begin to have a very smart, guided conversation that's super efficient and respects the time of the consumer. And you don't get these sort of dumb moments in a conversation, which is, well, how come it doesn't know that? Or why is it asking me that again? So we're trying to avoid those moments that break the end user out of the kind of the fictional dream of talking to somebody. So they know it's a digital assistant, but it's got to be cornerless. It's got to have no snags. It's got to be seamless and smooth. And that you can't generate that experience out of scratch. You've got to design it. You've got to think about the protocol. You've got to think about the kinds of moments that are likely to occur in a journey and the personas. And then you've got to have a machine that can capture all that and execute it at scale.
So, I mean, from my perspective, very compelling. I mean, healthcare is full of friction, and it sounds like you're the WD-40 for healthcare interactions.
I may have to steal that from you.
But I mean, it's true. That's exactly what we want. We want these frictionless experiences. So, can you share some examples of this in place, where it's working, how it's working?
Yeah, let me give you two examples. One, I'll give you a big, heavy, perfect example of getting a consumer through a healthcare visit. And let's go to one of the most acute imaginable high volume visit types there is, and that is the emergency room. Okay, so this is a published case study. This is Banner Health out of Arizona, 5 or 6 states. It's 28 hospitals in the network. If you walk into a Banner emergency department, you'll get a text message on your phone a minute after registering. And that text message will include a link. When you click it, your digital assistant will meet you and introduce itself as a digital assistant that's there to help you get through your visit. Now, an ER visit, an ED visit is going to be 3 to 4 hours on average. The long pole in the tent is a lab test. People want to know, if you're going to get a lab test or a blood test, you want to know that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting around to get the results for that test. So one of the things we do is we integrate with the back end EMR to get clinical data. We also are integrated to the registration system, so we know when you register. And we're integrated with a lab system and the image system. So it's 4 systems. And the chatbot is designed across states in the emergency room flow. So you've registered, you're in the waiting room, you'll be roomed, you're waiting to be dispositioned and then discharged, and all those stages things happen. So you don't want to ask things or do things out of sequence. You don't want to ask somebody who's already seen the doctor and is waiting for a test result a question that you would normally ask about early on in the waiting process. So the bot has to know flow, right, and has to know where you are in the flow. So we're pulling data back across these systems in real time, tens of thousands of HL7 messages that we're assimilating, pulling into the data system, and then fashioning for each and every patient who's getting updates all through, like a pizza tracker, all the way through that visit. So that is, it's 1 million plus patients annually coming through that flow. And if you think about what it would take to hire the equivalent human team to sit with each and every patient to let them know, oh, your doctor's Dr. Brown, your room is going to be free in just a moment. It's going to take about 45 minutes till you get your test results. Oh, you're about an hour away from getting discharged. Here's your discharge instructions. Imagine giving every patient in the emergency department a dedicated communicating agent to help them understand. It's you would never be able to fund that. So this technology is really a scale technology that's designed to drive patient experience and education and comfort and control. When you get information, you're becoming enabled, right? So if you can shift to sort of educating, communicating with consumers at scale in a situation like that, it can be groundbreaking. So that's a great example of a real-time, fully integrated digital assistant system that's covering high-volume patients and doing clinical good. We're doing a lot of work in COVID right now, just COVID-19, COVID screeners. Those are natural places to give healthcare teams who might have to take a phone call and help somebody get through a decision tree of, do you have symptoms? Have you been exposed? Here's what you do if you were. We need to get you tested. Here's how you do that. That whole conversation, which can be 8 minutes to 20 minutes per patient, can be pushed to these digital assistants. So at a time when we're super crunched for personnel and staff, that's one very targeted use case that we're doing a fair amount in right now, just because it's natural. But you can you can look across the healthcare spectrum, and these opportunities are everywhere. So we feel that we're on the cusp of a big moment where healthcare can suddenly scale up its access and its reach to drive great service in a way it just couldn't 4 years ago, 5 years ago. The technology didn't exist to make that happen.
So in the closing moments, what are your thoughts on where this will go? What's next? I mean, it feels like this is a great opportunity, but it also feels like there's some huge potential to do even more.
Yeah, I think it's the second inning, to use a baseball analogy. It's the second or third inning. Where a lot of healthcare systems are, laying the groundwork, the streets through the city for the pathways, and now people are moving down the streets and getting into the protocols. They're being guided, and the scale is there. The future is about perfecting that by learning from the decisions and choices and behavioral moves that people make while they get guided through these protocols. And so what we're going to see in the fourth inning, in the fifth inning, in the sixth inning, is leading institutions that get very good at pervasive, high-scale A/B testing of consumer behavior and choices. The platform also needs to be able to generate and randomize around specific feature choices. It could be diction level. It could be the number of times that you remind somebody. We're already seeing pretty significant bits of insight just around what it takes to get somebody to get to an appointment, to reduce no-show rates. And it turns out that, as a matter of fact, gender at a certain age does matter.
Right.
And what you do with somebody over 65 who doesn't have a companion living with them or doesn't have a driver set up for the visit is different than what you would do for somebody else. So the future in the fourth, fifth, sixth innings is all about institutions that get really good at engineering A/B tests at scale. So it's going to be about researchers and behavioralists and designers, and less about on the ground caretakers. You'll need those, but the communication aspect you'll augment with this technology and higher level skills.
Fantastic. Just remains for me to thank you for joining me. Fascinating opportunities. I think WD-40 for healthcare. We all need it. Greg, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at Dr. Nick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com. And tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.